Let's talk about anxiety and depression really quick and how certain things can affect it when we understand what is known as the 5-HT1A receptor. Before you turn off this video and you're like, okay, this is way too far down a scientific rabbit hole for what I want, let me explain something really quick. It's not as complex as it sounds. I just want to help you understand how your brain works when it comes down to anxiety and depression, some of the things that happen. But I also want to help you understand CBD a little bit more, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of marketers that are trying to push CBD as this miracle drug. And reality is, it's pretty impressive stuff, but it's important to know how it works with the physiology of the body, how it works with our neurochemistry, our neurotransmitters. So I'm going to give you a lowdown on how it actually works, because CBD does have a powerful effect on anxiety and depression. First off, we have to know that we have CB1 and CB2 receptors in the body. Okay, these are the receptors that usually are acted upon by endocannabinoids. Okay, they're acted upon by cannabis. They're acted upon by exogenous sources of things like that. Now, the interesting thing is CBD, cannabidiol oil, does not directly affect these CB1 and CB2 receptors, okay? Now, CB1 and CB2 can give you those sensations of well-being, that bliss, everything like that. Well, CBD oil doesn't directly affect those like cannabis would. What CBD does is it actually allows the body to create more of its natural endocannabinoids so that those CB1 and CB2 receptors can be acted upon by naturally produced endocannabinoids. Basically what that means is CBD oil allows your body to create more of the things that make you feel naturally very good. Okay, so let's talk about how it works when it comes down to your brain and as a potential anti-anxiety and antidepressant. You see, we have this receptor in the prefrontal cortex portion of our brain and the hippocampus portion of our brain. It's called the 5-HT1A receptor. Now, 5-HT1A stands for hydroxytryptamine. Okay? Hydroxytryptamine is a form or a subset of serotonin. But what ends up happening is when we are depressed or when we are anxious, we have less receptors for 5-HT1A in the prefrontal cortex and in the hippocampus. So what that means is we have less ability for the body to process certain types of serotonin. Serotonin is the feel-good neurotransmitter. Okay, it's the neurotransmitter that allows us to get a sense of well-being. And if you've ever heard of like Prozac or anything like that, the whole idea behind those is to increase your body's utilization of serotonin, so help you feel better. So that's a good thing. We want to feel good, but a lot of times if we go down that cascade of feeling anxious or depressed, we start to lose our ability to process serotonin very well. Now, what ends up happening is CBD directly affects the 5-HT1A receptor, making it more sensitive. So it's not like we're coming in and we're adding more of something that's going to make us feel good. We're making our body more responsive to it. We're helping the brain become more receptive to the neurotransmitters that help us feel good. And here's what's really interesting. The same neuron that actually releases serotonin, or 5-HT1A, is the same neuron that receives it. So there is a dispatch and a receiving portion of this neuron. Now, why on earth would a neuron both release and absorb serotonin? Well, it has to do with a negative feedback loop. Okay, what this negative feedback loop is very simple. When the body recognizes that it's released so much serotonin, it needs to be able to know how much is out there. So that way it can modulate how much more to release. So example being, the neuron releases a bunch of serotonin and you only utilize a small fraction of it. Well, because the receptor is on that same neuron, it can scavenge the rest of it and say, oh, wait a minute, we've seen that there's enough, we can stop producing it. It's your body's natural way of modulating how good you should feel, ultimately. So what ends up happening is since CBD works on one of these receptors, this hydroxytryptamine receptor, it allows your body to utilize more of it. So it's allowing your body to actually absorb it rather than just have to waste it and turn off production. Which leads me into the next section, SSRIs. Have you ever heard of a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, also known as something like Prozac? Okay, these SSRIs work in a very interesting way. They block the reabsorption of serotonin. So here's what happens in your body whenever you have a natural production of serotonin. Your body produces serotonin, and if it produces too much, it takes the extra and it reabsorbs it and releases it again later. It basically recycles it. Well, what CBD does is it acts on the receptor to make it so that it doesn't have to recycle it. And what an SSRI does, like Prozac, is it blocks the reabsorption. The reason you feel good when you take an antidepressant is because it's blocking the reabsorption of the serotonin. So the neuron released serotonin, the serotonin would normally go out to where it needs to go, but instead of your body reabsorbing the extra The SSRIs, the pharmaceuticals that you're taking, is artificially blocking the neuron's ability to reabsorb it. So you have all this spare serotonin floating around. You could see how that could be detrimental in the long term. It just doesn't seem healthy to just block something. But what CBD does is it naturally allows this hydroxytryptamine receptor to absorb more of what your body's already released. So ultimately, there's less to reabsorb because your body's fully utilizing it. I hope that makes sense. It's a pretty complex thing, and this is about as distilled as I can make it. Now, additionally, there's another more long-term component that happens when it comes down to consuming CBD. You see, we have this thing, again, in our brain called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the portion of the brain that is responsible for memory, long-term memory, spatial memory, even navigation. And when we're talking about navigation, we're not talking about just driving down the road. We're talking about navigation through life. Spatial awareness in a room. I'm standing in a room right now and there's things all around me. If I didn't have my hippocampus, I would be completely disoriented and wouldn't be able to even navigate my way through this. So again, it's not just geographically, it's just in life and in general and emotionally as well. So what ends up happening is, unfortunately, when people suffer from anxiety and depression, there are a lot of studies and scans that show that these patients end up having an atrophy of the hippocampus portion of their brain. They have less activity, less neuron activity, and their brain cells actually start to die. So there's an interesting study that was actually published in the International Journal of Neuropsychopharmacology, and it found that those that were suffering from a shrunken hippocampus, that were consuming CBD on a regular basis, so CBD that was administered regularly for an extended period of time, actually started to have neuroregenerative effects. They were creating new neurons in the hippocampus. New neurons in the hippocampus means that new life could be breathed into the brain, but was actually starting to shrink. So the portion of the brain that was becoming less and less active was now able to have new cells, new life, something that quite honestly 50, 60 years ago we didn't think was possible at all. That neuroregeneration is extremely powerful. So not only can you have a short-term effect by utilizing CBD properly, you can actually have an effect that lasts beyond just the actual utilization of the compound. So that's why I wanted to break this down. It goes a lot further than what is just happening in the very minute that you are in. It goes beyond that and it reaches into your overall nutrition and your overall genome and how your body is actually responding in the long term. And again, the nice thing about CBD, if it's good quality, is it's not triggering the CB1 and CB2 receptors. It's allowing your body to naturally utilize what it already has, just more efficiently, so that it can combat all the craziness that we go through in this world. As always, make sure you're keeping it locked in here on my channel. And any ideas for future videos, you know where to put them down in the comment section below. So I'll see you soon.